All right. Hey, Jake. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on the show. Nice to have you here. The reason you're here, I think, is because you've written a book, and according to your bio, it says it's your first book. So, why did you
That's correct.
decide? I guess I have to ask, why did you decide to write a book?
Well, this is a bit of a story, and I've been working on making this as concise as possible because it's a good story. People like to hear it, but I have always had stories. I wake up with full narratives in my head in the morning. I go for walks. I don't When I work out or go for a bike ride, I often don't listen to anything. I or even when I drive for hours to some other destination, I have these narratives in my head, and I really enjoy it. I've always wanted to write and planned to write, but I was busy making a living. I've had a successful career otherwise, and it always seemed like something that was more of a pastime. I didn't see it as really something that I could afford to do. I had a family, I had, raised kids and everything. What happened with in this situation was that I moved around a lot as a kid, and I don't have any connections with anyone I went to elementary school with. They're all very faded characters of my past, except this one guy who I was in the fifth grade with named Scotty. And I know you're thinking, what kind of tangent is this? But I was in the fifth grade with this kid named Scotty, and I remember him for some reason. He's always stuck in my mind. One reason was he got me into the band Kiss. He was a Kiss fanatic in the fifth grade. He'd bring the albums in. This was 1977, by the way. He'd bring the albums in, and I'd look at those pictures, and I would draw the Kiss logo on my notebooks, with the big blocky letters and the lightning strike S's, um, and I didn't even really listen to my parents probably would not be thrilled if I was listening to Kiss at home when I was in the fifth grade, but um, I didn't listen to music back then, but I just got into it, and I loved the characters. And Scott was this great friend of mine, and he was a bit of a nut. And I never saw him again after the fifth grade. Never saw him again, but he stuck in my head. So one day, about 40 years later, I was had some people over for dinner, and our kids were teenagers at the time. Our kids were friends, and they started talking about some things that the kids were going through and this and that. And I remembered Scott for some reason, this kid, Scotty Buell. And so I told a story about him. And the story I told, there's a couple stories about Scotty, only one I'm going to tell here, but he, one day, at the time I was living in Northern Virginia, suburban Washington, and we had a snow day, and I went over to his apartment, and he had gotten some sort of flammable liquid and a lighter and wanted to try to blow fire like Gene Simmons. And he lit himself on fire and dove into a snowbank to douse it. And I told that story, and they thought that was funny. Later on, my wife said, "Well," they asked me whatever happened to him. I said, "I don't know. I'm not in touch with the guy." My wife, Patty, suggested that I message him on Facebook or find him, see if I could find him on social media, Facebook. And I was very reluctant to do that. I did look him up, and I found him, and she encouraged me to message him, which I didn't want to do. I didn't want to message some guy I was in elementary school with. I thought that was about the creepiest thing you could do. But she said, what if you got a message from somebody that you knew 40 years ago that was talking about you, of one thing that you did back in the fifth grade? Wouldn't that be cool? And so I said, all right, fine. So I messaged him, and it was him. And he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you remember that. And we got connected. So the pandemic begins. This is 4 years ago right now. He reaches out to me and he said, hey, I've been messing with drones, flying drones around, and I started thinking about teaching kids using drones, and I'm doing these little Zoom classes. And it occurred to me it would be cool to have like a little animated show. And I know you work in Hollywood and maybe you know about producing stuff like that. I said, I don't know, man, I'll check in on your Zoom. And I logged into the Zoom. There's only 5 kids in the Zoom, and they had these little drones, and Scott was teaching them, and I was blown away. I mean, these kids were engaged. They were having a great time. They were learning science and math through these little drone courses. And Scott was beaming. And afterwards, I said, dude, I think this is great. You're really onto something here. This is cool. And we started talking about the idea of making that a big curriculum. He had an idea of making this like a way to teach kids. But how do you get it outside of giving 5 kids on a Zoom a class and make it a business? Um, and he had this idea of doing like a baby Einstein sort of animation. I woke up one morning with an idea for a wild story that was not that, and I wrote a treatment to do like an animated or live action series, and passed it around here in town a bit, and folks thought it was pretty good. And then I realized I wanted to write it as a book. I didn't want to go into make a television show or pitch it as a movie or animated series as a treatment. I would have no leverage with it, and I wanted to. We also had this idea. I had this idea of building an audience first, building a world, and creating a book that incorporated a lot of themes that could be used in the classroom. You know, a lot of the STEM themes that Scott was talking about with his idea for teaching kids with drones, also cultural literacy things that kids deal with, problems, bullying, things like that that you deal with as a child. I'd watched my own kids grow up at this point and saw some of the realities of their childhood, how it differed from mine. And so I wanted to write something that was entertaining and fun because the narrative, the story is super cool, but also was inspirational to engage kids with the stuff they're learning in school. You know, my boys are both excellent math students. They're both studying to be mechanical engineers. Great at math, couldn't stand it. All they did in school was take these advanced courses so that they could take tests. That's the way students view it. And I think we need to connect kids with what they're learning in school to real things in the world. And that's was sort of the inspiration for the book. So that was a very long story. I'm not doing very well at making this concise, but it started because of a kid in fifth grade lit himself on fire. And then he had this brilliant idea to teach kids with using drones. And it inspired me to write a story that is a bit science fiction. It incorporates some time travel.
So you have a production company, correct? You run a production company?
I do.
Okay, so why did
I
you
do.
write a treatment for this rather than just producing it yourself?
Well, you know, producing something and making it commercially viable and getting it out there are two different things, you know. I also learned something about myself creatively. You know, because I ended up working in the motion picture business, I always thought that I would write my stories as screenplays. And I have learned through this and I've learned through this process that I think I might like writing books better. Um, One of the reasons is I learned about myself that I have to find it. You know, it was a really amazing experience for me to come up with these characters. I had a general idea. I mean, a treatment is one page, and this is a 342-page book, right? So I had a general idea, and it happened. It was as if I was watching a story unfold to some extent. It was as if I would start writing a plot point or a chapter, and I wouldn't necessarily know where it was going. It would sort of come out and find itself. The characters evolved and developed almost like they were individual people, not something coming out of my consciousness. So um, I learned in my own creative process that I might prefer to write books. The other thing I've realized is if you write a screenplay, if I go to pitch a screenplay, um, there are several gatekeepers between my audience that I want to entertain and my idea. You know, writing a book, I'm speaking directly to that audience. I can write my book, and in today's world with self-publishing, put it out there, and that stream of consciousness goes direct to my audience. And if it's successful, I think it makes it a lot easier to produce as content.
So the book is called The Rise of the Legends. And how do the drones fit into this? What do the drones have to do with teaching kids life lessons? How does that work?
Right. Well, there is a drone in it, and one of the reasons there's a drone is because I had gone started on this venture with my friend Scott, um, and he was using drones in an actual curriculum to build a curriculum for kids to learn science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I did want to tie in because their company has ended up basically buying into this my book. So I've already got a company behind this enterprise. So I did want to incorporate it, but the drone in this case, for the most part, first, and another thing about drones is this: with kids, it is something cool that they're engaged in and do. It's one of those few things that is you can go do outside and play with. It's not just a phone. It's something you go outside and you can go and do things out in the real world. You can fly it. You can use it to record video. They do all sorts of things. So it's a cool toy in our contemporary world. In this case of the story, um, the inciting moment is actually when the kids are part of a after school drone club, and they go out on their first mission, and the evil bad kid, the antagonist, disrupts them, and in doing so actually nearly causes a very serious accident, and they are saved by something they don't understand that swoops out of the sky and interferes and intercepts it. And it's a drone. And this drone is actually from the future. It's an AI drone. It talks in three voices. It has three personas, and it's a sort of mysterious thing. There's a teacher in the story who actually learns what the drone really is and learns it's come from the future. The reason it's called the Rise of the Legends is because these kids end up being legendary characters, but they're just 13-year-old kids right now. The drone was sent back from the future to make sure that they are not interrupted in their path to become these legendary characters that change the world, because somebody else came back from the future to potentially stop them. So that is the drone in the story, and it's sort of it's not involved in their everyday part of the narrative. It's out there. It weaves things together. It's sort of the whole idea of the time travel and how this connects. But in the story, the kids use all sorts of things. They use old technology. They use a crystal radio. They use a sextant. They build compasses with a magnet and needle. So there's all sorts of technology. And I did want to include technology from the past and technology from the future. One of the characters, Kendall, has these glasses, which Apple has since come out with something similar, but these glasses, which basically are augmented reality, but they look like regular glasses, and she can get all sorts of information from them and use them as a tool. So there's technology that doesn't exist in it as well. And the kids do have drones, and they build custom drones that they can use for specific missions they come up with. And that's where the drones tie in.
Okay. We've got about 1 minute left.
Oh boy.
Do you have a website that you want to give out?
The website for the book is riseofthelegends.com, and there is some additional information. You can order books. Eventually, that site will host all sorts of additional content. I should mention that part of the idea is to build this whole world. So there's a fan club sign up on the site, and if you sign up, you start getting a lot of the adventures, and you'll get secret codes, you'll get missions and things like that you can participate in. You can build your team. You can actually be a drone legend in the real world, and have a lot of the adventures that the characters in the story have.
Okay, what is the target audience for this?
9 to 14, probably more specifically 10 to 13, kind of depending on one's reading level. We call it upper middle grade.
Has the book been released?
It released yesterday, as a matter of fact.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Yeah.
And
it's available. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's available through your website?
You can get it from the Drone Legends website, the Rise of the Legends website. You can order it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, or go to your local bookseller.
Okay.
And ask them to order it. It's got international distribution.
Super. All right, Jake. Well, thank you for coming on the show. It was nice meeting you, and best of luck with this.
Thanks, Douglas. Nice meeting you. I appreciate your time.